All right, we are now back in session. You can proceed.
Also, I believe you're describing the nature of your injuries.
Yes, ma'am. I had a minor wrist injury that I didn't report. Um, because it was not. It probably hurt 1 or 2 days, but it was no serious injury, so I did not report it.
Okay. And was that the extent of it?
No, ma'am. So, as she hit me with her vehicle, she proceeded around my unit. As I stated, Lieutenant Hendricks then pulled up on scene and saw exactly her hitting me with her vehicle, and that caused, due to our policy, able to pursuit. So she pursued the vehicle down South Lake Parkway at a high rate of speed. Um, she then noticed the vehicle crash into a median after running a stop sign or a
What? Do you know
barrier.
what this median is? Where is this located?
This is located on 1000 South Lake Circle, so she was headed to the South Lake Mall.
Um,
They're like little barriers with vegetation.
she ran
Well,
into one.
yes, ma'am. She read the stop sign and ran into one of those barriers with vegetation. Completely went through it and coasted through the parking lot of Macy's, probably an estimated 100 yards, and into a small hill, which had a curb as well. Ran over the curb and into a tree. At
Uh,
that time, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Now, all this happened about what time of day?
So this happens, the call came out in 2049 hours.
Which is in normal time.
Uh, 8 o'clock, 8:49.
8:49 p.m.
Yes, ma'am.
And were there people parked in Macy's parking lot?
No, ma'am, there were not.
Do you know about how fast her vehicle was going?
No, ma'am. By the time I was in my vehicle, they were heading down South Lake Parkway. I was headed down Jonesboro Road and onto Mount Zion Road to try to cut her off.
Were there any people on the road at that time of day?
No, ma'am.
Nobody.
Exactly. I mean, there was on Jonesboro Road. There was one vehicle on South Lake Parkway, from what I saw from her video.
When you say her, who are we talking about?
Lieutenant Hendricks.
Okay. Now, after crashing the vehicle, were you all able, after the defendant crashed her vehicle, were you all able to detain her?
Yes, ma'am. For by assisting her to the ground. Actually, when I arrived on scene, Lieutenant Hendrick tried to give her commands to get out of the vehicle, but she would not comply with those commands. I eventually ended up going to assist her to get her out of the vehicle and onto the ground to get her in handcuffs.
Now, did you see the person who struck you with their vehicle a little bit earlier that day?
I'm sorry, restate that?
Were you able to see the person who struck you with their vehicle earlier that day?
Like,
Yeah,
is it before the call?
yeah, I'm going to object because it's kind of vague. Probably the same reason the officer's asking that question. I'm not sure what she means.
You were hit by a car earlier, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you able to see the driver of that car?
Yes, ma'am.
The person that you detained later on that evening, was that the same person?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
Now, as you all were trying to detain her, did anything happen?
We did have to force her to the ground where she was resisting arrest. We were finally able to get her in handcuffs, and my lieutenant and I did a incident to arrest search. Once that was completed, we were trying to sit her on the curb, and she resisted. So we eventually assisted her to the patrol unit and tried to get her into the patrol unit. She resisted that as well. I eventually went around to the other side of the patrol unit to try to drag her into the patrol unit from the other side. She was then asking my sergeant, Wilson, to loosen the handcuffs. Uh, he did loosen the handcuffs. After asking for my key, I went around and he loosened the handcuffs. And then we talked her into the vehicle, and she strapped her seatbelt in. Once all that occurred, I then searched for her license inside of her vehicle because we still needed to ID her. We eventually found the license of an Ohio license. At that time, we were coming. Actually, we were all standing around her vehicle, and my sergeant then announced that she was outside of the vehicle and running across the parking lot. We
So
then,
hold on, officer, because you got quite a few charges here. Okay,
yes, ma'am.
you all placed her in whose patrol vehicle?
So we originally placed her in Sergeant Wilson's vehicle.
Was that door closed?
Her side, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Was she in cuffs or anything?
Yes, ma'am. She was.
Then she got out of that car?
Yes, ma'am. She did.
Did she still have the cuffs on?
Yes, ma'am. She did.
Was she what? I believe you were going into what she did next.
Yes, ma'am. She ran across the parking lot, all the way across onto South Lake Parkway and hid behind an electrical box.
Were you all able to detain her or catch
Yes,
her?
ma'am. We did.
Did you notice anything about her person unusual?
Yes, ma'am. She
Yeah,
she was intoxicated.
Judge, I'm gonna object again. Yeah, I'm gonna object again. It's vague. I don't like anything unusual. Like it doesn't necessarily pertain to anything. So I'll say it's vague and of questionable relevance.
Your Honor, I believe the officer was able to respond to the question as asked. I can be more specific, but I believe that would draw an objection too.
Okay, all right, it's overruled. He answered it.
Officer, how did you describe her condition again?
So she seemed intoxicated. We could smell alcohol on her breath. And it was a very strong odor of alcohol. Actually, as soon as I pulled her out of the vehicle, I could smell alcohol. When we first made contact with giving her commands and pulling her out of the vehicle. But we smelled alcohol. Her eyes were very glossy, bloodshot red.
Did she
And
say?
yes, ma'am, she did. As we were adjusting her handcuffs, she stated that that I had a.
This is not relevant to anything that's on the calendar as far as whether or not she smelled like alcohol or anything like that. I don't see any charges that are relevant.
She's charged with DUI.
No, it was dismissed at first appearance. Was charged with it. It was dismissed. It's not on the calendar today.
Your Honor, it is still relevant in regards to as to her behavior that night. I believe the officer.
All right, overruled.
Now, officer, did you say she said something to you that night?
Yes, ma'am. Quite a bit actually. After she ran and we found her behind the electrical box, she stated that I had a small. Excuse my language. I'm going to say exactly what she said, and it's in my report. She said that I had a small dick.
And did she say anything else to you?
Yes, ma'am. She stated to my lieutenant that she couldn't realize whether she was a man or a woman. My lieutenant then stated to her that she was a woman, and then she was still trying to, or still making statements that she was a man. And then later that, after transporting her to the hospital, she was accusing us of sexual assault.
Did she ever say anything to you that might have placed you in fear?
Yes, ma'am. She, while I was doing paperwork and we were waiting for the doctor, she stated that she was going to find me and my wife and kids, and she was going to beat them up.
And that's why you were at the hospital?
Yes, ma'am. We were at the hospital trying to get her assessed due to our policy. because of the accident and the pursuit as well.
Now, officer, did she damage any property at the original incident location?
Not to my knowledge, no ma'am. Not at the gas station.
Excuse me.
Was any property damaged at all?
I'm objecting. Again, this is not relevant to a charge.
I believe, Your Honor, was the criminal damage to property count dismissed also?
Terroristic threats was dismissed, criminal damage to property, second degree DUI, and battery.
Okay, I'm sorry, Your Honor.
It's okay.
Clayton did.
Found this on the web.
Huh?
What is the 3 was just
So those were all dismissed at first appearance by a different judge.
Yeah, I'm going strictly by the warrant. I'm not even looking at my calendars.
Oh, okay. All right. So you don't have to argue those four.
Your Honor, I'm gonna move on. I think that might have covered everything, actually. So, officer, just to be sure I've covered everything, she was not charged for anything at the sit-go, correct?
She was charged with battery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the one that was dismissed because they didn't list the employee's name.
Well, Your Honor, if the battery's gone, I think that covers everything. That's all the state has at this time, reserved right for reader, right?
All right, Mr. Rogers?
Thank you. Judge, just trying to get the Zoom, trying to manipulate my screen over here. Also, you're the lead on the case,
Yes, sir, I am.
and you, everything that you discussed, you have dashed. Well, I guess, sounds like if I understood correctly, at some point you were out of the vehicle. Do you have a body cam of the parts when you were out of the vehicle?
Yes, sir, I do.
And if I'm not mistaken, you also prepared a warrantless arrest for David in this case, correct?
Yes, sir, I did.
And it was completed on oath, correct?
Yes, sir.
To the best of your knowledge and belief.
Yes, sir.
To kind of get clear on a couple of things, I want to make sure I heard you correctly or direct. You said that Ms. Asbury struck you with the vehicle, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
But can I need to share my screen?
Okay, hold on. I have to enable it. Wrong thing. No, you should be able to. It's enabled that you should be able to share.
Okay, give me 1 second. I'm going to
All right.
My first time, I think, doing the screen sharing, but let's see how this goes.
Make sure you have everything else closed out, or we're gonna see
Yes,
it.
it's my work computer. Ain't nothing too crazy on here, so yeah, I think I got it. All right. Austin, can you see the screen right now?
Yes, sir.
And I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. What do you see right now?
I'm seeing all of the charges and the narrative of that WIA.
You see it okay? It looks like you're on your phone. I don't know if you can see it well enough to read it or not.
Let's see if I can zoom in. I can zoom in.
I want to direct your attention to the second line of the narrative where it starts. The first part of that line is to drive off. Can you see that part? It's right up under the print.
Yes, yeah, I see it. Yes.
All right. Can you see the end of that line where it says, well, actually, I guess I'll just read the whole sentence that I'm looking at. It says, quote, I was ordering her out of the vehicle and she sped off, almost hitting me. Do you see that
Yes,
part?
sir. Yes, sir, I do see that.
Okay. On direct, you said that she did hit you, but right there it says that she almost hit you. Which one is it?
So at the stress of the situation, if in all honesty, I didn't even feel her hit me with her vehicle. After doing the report and watching the video, um, it is clear as day of her hitting me with her vehicle.
And just so I'm clear, you saying that you prepared this during the event, like while you were chasing her or being hit?
No, sir. After that, I was doing this at the hospital, so I was still being at the first time that this is actually um, a high elevated case that I have been on since I have been an officer. My adrenaline level is still actually high because, for one, she was threatening me and my family, and then the other case of her still resisting the entire time, my adrenaline was still high. So, as I'm filling out this paperwork at the hospital, um, still trying to come down off of that. Honestly, I just wrote everything of thinking back to that incident, and honestly, I didn't remember her actually hitting the vehicle because I don't. My elevation was too high of adrenaline. I didn't feel it. So
So if I understand it, I guess your perception of the event you're saying was not accurate.
yes, sir. At that time,
And the, I just want to ask you about a couple of other things. Give me one thing. I just want to get back to the notes I was taking on direct. And as far as everything that occurs after, if I understand correctly, after she leaves the Circle K, well, let me ask, because it sounds like you weren't necessarily the one, I guess, in closest pursuit at that time. I think you said something about going another way to try to cut her off or something like that.
yes, sir.
Do you know whether or not the other officers captured the events you described on their dash cameras or anything?
Yes, sir. As soon as we initiate our lights, both the dash cam and our body cameras come on, so it records everything that occurs.
And where were you? Well, let me ask, when you were testifying, where, and you were just, discussing what happened and everything, is that something that you actually witnessed? Like, how'd you get that information? Did you see it? Was it relayed to you? Did you review the video? Like, how'd you get that information?
As far as the pursuit or the incident with me and her at the beginning?
No, the pursuit, when you talked about the median and Macy's and all of that.
Yes, sir. So it is captured on video of my lieutenant's body cam. I'm sorry, dash cam of her. Uh, After the word of her going completely through the barrier, you could see her right at the very end of her going through and coasting off in the parking lot.
And so, just so I'm clear, like, I just want to make sure I understand. You're saying you saw the video, I guess.
Yes, sir. I watched her dash cam.
And a couple more questions about the part where I guess you talked about her getting out of the police car after she was already in the car. Did you say you were standing around? Sound like you said y'all were standing around the vehicle when the sergeant announced she was out of the vehicle. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Of her vehicle. We were standing around her vehicle.
Okay, so y'all standing around the sergeant's vehicle.
No, sir. We were standing around Asbury's vehicle.
Okay, so y'all standing around that vehicle, and she had been placed in another car, in a police car at that time.
Yes, sir.
And if I understood correctly, you said the door on her side was closed. Does that mean like there's a door open somewhere or something?
Yes, sir. And the door was open on the passenger side. I'm sorry. The door was closed on the passenger side. The driver's side door was the one that was open.
And I, I see 2 counts of obstruction charged, and I guess I'm trying to get clear. I understand, I guess, to the extent that she's running off after or while y'all trying to arrest or whatever. What are the 2 charges though? Like, what are the basis for each one?
So the basis of each one are her resisting getting out of the vehicle. Well, there's countless. I think I could have done charges for obstruction. But I mean, you pick one. She could have resisting getting out of the vehicle, resisting sitting down on the curb, resisting getting into the vehicle. When trying to obtain her information as far as identifying her, she wouldn't give us a name. She wouldn't do any of that. She was resisting getting back in the vehicle once she got out of the patrol unit to run. She resisted at the hospital. I mean, there's countless times, but there's one of resisting getting in the vehicle, resisting getting out of the vehicle of her vehicle, resisting getting into the patrol unit, and resisting getting into the other patrol unit when she escaped.
Why was she at the hospital?
She was at the hospital to get assessed once there is a pursuit and an accident at that. She has to get assessed by the hospital to clear her in order to go to the jail. It is for our policy.
All right, no further questions at this time.
All right, any redirect?
1 second, Your Honor. Officer, I believe there was some conversation about the multiple counts of obstruction. And in your testimony, you mentioned your supervisor. What is her name?
Sergeant Wilson's my patrol supervisor. Lieutenant Hendricks is on the road as well.
Was she the one that attempted to stop the defendant when she went down into the South Lake Parkway?
Yes, ma'am.
Did she have lights and sirens going?
Yes, ma'am.
Did she attempt to stop Miss Asbury?
Yes, ma'am.
Did Miss Asbury stop?
No, ma'am.
Is that considered obstruction?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Objection, it's not, it ain't for him to decide. She's asking for him to make a legal conclusion. She can ask him about what happened, what he observed, or things of that nature, but that's an improper question to ask him to make a legal conclusion. That's your job, Judge.
And I do believe that is a proper question. The officer can describe what he observed. He also can describe the basis for a charging decision on his case. I believe he made several examples. Ma'am?
Yes, I said instead of asking him to make a legal conclusion, just ask him what was the basis for it.
Then I asked the question in reverse, Your Honor. What was the basis of the obstruction, Your Honor? Not Your Honor, I'm sorry, officer.
The obstruction or the basis of obstruction, she basically wouldn't get out of the vehicle at all when ordered to multiple times by my lieutenant, and I. Then we had to assist her out. She wouldn't get into the patrol unit the first time. She wouldn't get in the patrol unit the second time as she escaped. So that was the 3 bases that I put it on.
So there were at least 3 that you could, during the course of this particular incident, that you would use as a basis. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Also, there was some questioning about you placing the word almost in your WAA. Do you recall that?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you sure that she actually struck you with her car?
Yes, ma'am.
And I think you said you had some type of physical injury.
Yes, ma'am. There was pain in my left wrist.
Was that as a result of being struck by the vehicle, or was it due to something else?
No, ma'am. It was due to the vehicle. I had my hand on the windshield of her vehicle, standing beside her driver's side.
Okay. And I believe that's all I have of the officer.
All right, any follow-up, Mr. Rogers?
Just briefly, officer, if I understand correctly, I think you just said you were on the driver's side. that correct?
Yes, sir.
So just to be a little bit more clear, at any point you ever, well, which way is the vehicle going, I guess, at the time when you're on the driver's side, is it going forward or in reverse?
It was going in reverse at the time.
So at the point that it's moving, are you ever behind the vehicle?
And you talking about as she sped off?
Right. It sounds like you were on the side. I'm just trying to make sure I'm clear. You weren't behind the vehicle, you were beside the vehicle.
Yes, sir. I was beside the vehicle as she was pulling out or backing out. I had my my left hand on the windshield, talking to her from both the windshield and the driver's side just to get her to comply.
And so if I'm understanding, if your hand is on the windshield, when you're saying the windshield, you mean the front windshield?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the car would be moving on, the front windshield would be moving away from you, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, no further questions.
All right. Any other witnesses, Ms. Thomas?
No, ma'am.
All right, Mr. Rogers, any evidence or witnesses on behalf of the defendant?
Argument, Judge.
You said yes?
No, I said just argument.
Oh, okay. All right. Ms. Thomas, are you going first or are you waiving the right to go first?
I'll waive my right.
All right, Mr. Rogers?
Thank you. Judge, I hope it's pretty obvious. I'm asking for a dismissal on the aggravated assault charge for a couple of reasons. For one, we have a written statement under oath from this officer that said almost hit. Almost is not hitting. Almost. That's pretty much exactly what it means is. Another way of phrasing that is did not hit me. If something almost happened, that means it did not happen. So that'd be my first issue with that. Alternatively, if we take the officer's explanation at face value, his recollection of events at that time is inaccurate. So I'm not sure that we can really give much credibility to anything that he's had to say this morning if he was not perceiving things accurately, even at that time. Third, as it relates to the aggravated assault charge, it's not any contact that somebody makes with you as an aggravated assault. The officer was not behind the vehicle. The vehicle is moving in reverse. He's not behind it. He's got his hand on the front windshield again. The vehicle would be moving in reverse. That would mean that it would be moving away from the hand, not towards the hand. So for those reasons, Judge, I would ask that the aggravated assault be dismissed for lack of probable cause. As it relates to the escape charge, Judge, I would argue that that's largely just a trumped up obstruction charge. Obviously, it's being alleged that Ms. Asbury said some inflammatory things to the officers.
No, I thought he said that after the cuffs got placed on her, he took off running.
You said after the cuff got placed?
Like a hand, like I don't know if it was one handcuff or two handcuffs, but I remember him saying that she was cuffed or in the process of being cuffed, and then she took off running.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
I think that was the basis for the escape.
Yes, ma'am. That's what I heard. So yeah, I would agree that that's what the testimony was. My issue with that is that I'm not ready to agree that amounts to an escape under the circumstances. If they're trying to place her into confinement, that's not the same as her being officially confined. So I would ask that the escape charge would be dismissed on that basis. And I'm not sure if I heard anything to support an improper lane change. So I don't recall hearing anything that would support that. So I'd ask that those charges all be dismissed for lack of probable cause.
All right, Ms. Thomas?
Yes, ma'am. Your Honor, state would stand on the officer's testimony.
All right, the court finds sufficient probable cause. This case will be bound over to Superior Court. Further prosecution, this matter is adjourned.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome. All right, so I don't see any more officers online or any more coming. We have Bird.
I have one officer who was logged on earlier.
Okay.
That would be Officer, I'm sorry, I'm doing paperwork and this. Oh, Officer Sterling. He was logged on for most of the day, Your Honor. He had
Which
to
case
log
was
on. That would be Defendant Tommy Wilson. He is Mr. Lewis's case.
Oh, okay. And what happened?
He had to actually log off because his duty shift started at 6 o'clock and he had to get ready to go to work. So I'm thinking
He had to get what? I'm sorry.
he had to go to work,
Oh, okay.
put on his uniform and go to work. So he had to report in to work at 6 o'clock. I can try to call him back now. I told him I'd let him know we were going to be meeting him tonight.
Yeah, tell him to log back in.